Thursday when we did what to do about agriculture and a climate emergency. And today it's much more about industry and changing transport and our other systems. So that's what the Green New Deal is all about. So I don't really need to run through this slide with this audience, do I? I mean, we're in trouble with climate, that's enough to say. We've been having some fun on the streets of London this week. Some of you may have seen that there were various arrests and interesting events at Trafalgar Square. The pressure's on now to really do something about the climate emergency, but I think what we need to do is to take positive action. And again, that's where we're at with the Green New Deal. It's not about convincing people there's a problem, people are convinced. It's about what action can we take, and that's where the Green New Deal comes in. Okay, so a little bit about where the Green New Deal comes from. You can see our illustrious guest Caroline Lucas on this slide here. And the Green New Deal has been around in terms of thought and discussion for about a decade now. And as Barbara said when she was introducing, originally it came out of the financial crisis in the sense that we were in a situation of economic recession actually. And we didn't want to just see the economy boosted back on the same old unhelpful track towards unsustainable growth and financialisation. And the suggestion was that instead we make sure that money is sent in a positive direction to stimulate the sustainability transition. And if only we'd done that a decade ago. But anyway, the idea didn't take off as much as we would have hoped at that time. In spite of being supported by some really excellent economists, particularly from the New Economics Foundation. And I think this clearly fits very well into our ideas about economics and into green economics generally. As you'll see, the kind of things we're proposing and the way we're proposing to fund it will mean that the economy completely changes. In fact, our whole lives will be transformed, but we will also make sure that at the end of the process we have better quality jobs and a much more equal society, and that really is about how it's funded, and that's why that's my particular interest. The European Greens picked this idea up in 2010 and have also supported it since then, and I think it did catch the public imagination at that time, but it didn't turn into any particular practical change. Then just recently, some Democrat politicians in the US, particularly Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, have latched onto this idea, and I think it's really caught on more in the US. And that's probably not surprising because the original Green Deal, or the original New Deal rather, was part of the policy of Franklin D. Roosevelt after the big crash in 1929. And so the whole idea about rethinking what money's for, rethinking how banks work, and the need for public stimulus to revive the economy after a crash really had more purchase there. So I think what we have to do a little bit is to challenge this idea that it's just about stimulating the economy. Because obviously as Greens we understand that growth for growth's sake is really part of the problem and one of the major causes of the environmental collapse that we're seeing all around us. And so rather than that, what we're saying is that we need to think about the need to shrink our economy at the same time as making sure that economic activity achieves something useful. And that's really the framing, I would say, for the Green New Deal. So we start off by considering these three interlinked crises, and therefore we have three interlinked solutions. So we've got a financial system that is geared towards a concentration of wealth in fewer and fewer hands and privatising wealth and privatising public assets and making sure that, again, those are concentrated with a small number of people. It's clear that our economic system does not work for the common good, and it actually is working in the interests of a tiny elite, and the rest of us are just kind of tools or kind of slaves in that system. And at the same time, we're faced with climate collapse, a climate emergency, ecological collapse, and this appalling biodiversity crisis that means life on Earth is really at risk. So we see those three crises as interlinked, and the Green New Deal suggests that the solutions are also interlinked. So we need to eradicate inequality, we need to end precarious and poorly paid employment, and we can do that through public investment in the green sectors that we need to secure our future. We can also create thousands of good quality jobs in green sectors. And I think it's important to note that when we talk about the Green New Deal, the jobs we're going to be creating will be in every community. You know, you cannot insulate a home in Stroud in China, right? You have to do it here. And the same applies to renewable electricity generation. The same applies to investment in our transport systems. So when we talk about creating jobs, those jobs will be here and in all our communities, right across the European Union, in fact. And of course, the third and most important objective of this programme is that we will rapidly decarbonise the economy so that we're reducing carbon emissions and tackling the climate emergency. So in the West Country, when I'm doing this pitch, I always talk about it as the Western Powerhouse. I get so irritated by this idea of the Northern Powerhouse, and the West just sort of gets left aside. So, you know, you can cut Plymouth off and there's no railway track there for a year and nobody really notices because it's only Plymouth. Anyway, and when I'm down that far west, I easily convince them that actually the Industrial Revolution started in Cornwall. How many people think that's true? Come on, stick up for the Cornish. So my justification for saying that is that the steam engine was invented by Richard Trevithick. I mean, that's clearly a Cornish name. And it was actually turned into locomotion also in Cornwall. And then somebody up north kind of got hold of that idea and, you know, the rest is history. But it started in Cornwall. So I think we can also see that here in the West Country, we're coming up with a lot of the very creative ideas around what the green transition would look like. I don't need to mention Extinction Rebellion in this audience, but also in terms of what a green industrial revolution would look like. So some of you might have got caught in the rain earlier on, and all those lovely frontal systems come off the Atlantic, and they bring lots of lovely wind with them, and that's exactly what we need to generate renewable energy. And we also, in Cornwall, have the best possible incidence anywhere on the Earth's surface. This is what they tell me, to generate solar energy. So we've got actually fantastic resources here in the West Country, and they are already being used. So we're well on the way, I would say, towards creating a green industrial revolution in our part of the world. But the really important thing is, how are we going to make sure this happens faster? And so my question around Brexit is, oh, I can't believe I used that word. I promised myself I wasn't going to today. But, you know, the EU is going to do this anyway. Right at the heart of what the Commission is doing is this idea of a European Green Deal, thanks to everybody here who voted Green in the European elections, and right across Europe. That's top of the list now in terms of the Commission's work priorities and what the Parliament is going to be doing. So if we stay in the EU, how do I make sure that the South West gets a full share of that financing? But if we leave the EU, how is it going to be funded in Britain? That's a question we need to ask all our politicians here. Some of you know that last time I was elected, I commissioned a report called The Power to Transform, and that showed that in the West Country, we could generate all the energy we need, not just the electricity, but all the energy from renewable resources. And if we did that, we'd be creating lots of high-quality jobs. But, you know, what's holding us back? Same old, same old. It's the Tory government, it's their friends in the fossil fuel industry that are preventing us not only from doing what we need to do for the climate, but also from having that economic boost and those good quality jobs in the Southwest. So, yeah, we'll take this as read. It's an audience in Stroud. You know the Tories are useless on energy. Next slide. So what kind of policy framework do we need? Well, obviously, I find this first point incredible, but I have to say that we need to end fossil fuel subsidies. We are still giving subsidies to fossil fuels. It's so absurd, it goes without saying. Obviously, we ought to also ban fracking. A little cheer here for the fact that that Quadrilla have left the site in Preston New Road, so it seems that maybe we've succeeded on the second point as well. End new build nuclear, invest in public transport, restore the fuel tax levy so that it gets more and more expensive all the time to use any type of fossil fuel. And also, obviously, make sure that we are supporting renewables that have been undermined over the past 5 years. So what sort of things would happen in a Green New Deal? What would all these jobs be actually doing? I think top of my list is always this free home insulation, but then how many people have visited my home? No, I'm joking. When I moved to Brussels, actually, I was really astonished by the fact that they don't have wind inside their homes in other European countries. That's a British thing. It's all about the stiff upper lip, you know. You'll find that it's very good for you. This is why I haven't invited Caroline to stay with me tonight. But no, I think, you know, we have appalling quality homes. People die every year of cold in the winter because our homes are such poor quality, they can't afford to heat them. So it's obviously a triple win situation. It will create jobs, it will reduce carbon emissions, it will mean everybody's more comfortable in the home. This should be paid for free, you know, like almost on prescription. Then we need to convert our homes because we're heating our homes with fossil fuels. How many people here have gas heating? Yeah, exactly, almost everybody. I mean, that needs to be phased out over the next 5 to 10 years. There's simply no plan for that, but that's a crucial part of the Green New Deal, of what the Green New Deal would mean. And of course, that also means somebody coming into all the homes of those people who raised their hands, making that change. Important work that needs to be done. Then we need to improve our public transport infrastructure and get that off fossil fuels. So that would clearly mean a big shift out of private cars into hydrogen buses, into electrified trains. Redesigning cities for active travel and sustainable living, that's just a huge agenda in itself. Rethinking the way cities work so that they're not so energy hungry, so that people can comfortably walk around, building cycle tracks, making sure it's safe to walk, and so on. Circular economy, this is more about what happens in the private sector, but changing the way businesses work, creating incentives so they're not pulling resources in and then throwing waste out at the other end, but everything has a use at the end of the process. And that requires a major design of the way all our companies work. And lastly, the sustainability transition for food and farming, which we covered last week. Sorry if you weren't here for the last show, but no. You know, there's a lot more to do on that, and I'm organising some seminars across the region, talking to farmers and soil experts and food experts and so on to rethink how we do that. And that's obviously a big job for us here in the Southwest because we're such a significant farming area. Jules is mostly going to talk about how we pay for this, but I want to briefly introduce this because this is absolutely crucial. If we fund this through private finance, through debt-based, interest-based finance, then effectively richer people who have spare money will be giving that to this project. And in the future, the interest will be paid by poorer people who didn't have so much money. That's how interest-based financing takes money from the rich, from the poor, and gives it to the rich. And that we must make sure this doesn't happen that way. That's why we need public financing through tax, through green quantitative easing, through municipal bonds, through systems where the money that's created stays with us, the people, and the assets that are created belong to us as well. If we don't have this, at the end of the sustainability transition, we'll all be poorer and the rich will be richer. And we must not allow that to happen. And that's why what Jules is going to tell you about the Avon Mutual is so important. I just always like to show this slide, which is the KfW, which is the German Public Development Bank. So after the war, obviously Germany needed to do an enormous amount of rebuilding. So in fact it was, I think, just like we wrote their constitution, I think it was British and German economists, British and American economists who set up this bank as well, which is a tragedy because we don't have anything like it and it's an absolutely brilliant bank. So basically when a bank makes a loan, it creates money. And so if it's a public bank, then that money belongs in the public sector. And this is a public bank, and so all the money that was loaned during the reconstruction of Germany after the war created public good because it had to, because it was a public bank, and it also generated more value for this bank. So then when they needed to pay for reunification after 1990, again, they could turn to this bank, and they had resources there in order to lend for the reconstruction and for unification. And of course, when they needed to make the sustainability transition, again, an awful lot of that has been funded through the KfW. So, thank you. So this is exactly what we need in this country, but we have this completely privatized banking model here. I assume you're going to talk about this, aren't you, about the German banking model. I love the German banking model. They always invite me to speak at German banking events in Brussels because I always say how much I love the KfW. But we just so much need a public bank in this country. We used to have the Green Investment Bank. Am I right? I think that was the name, yeah. But it was really a fund and not a bank, and then it was privatized by the Tories anyway. So we just don't have anything like this, and this is what we need to fund the Green New Deal. So I just think this is central to whether this process is going to work for us all or not. But we can also have, we can pay for some of this through taxation, and I think also the process of creating public money, national central banks creating money through this quantitative easing process is going to be part of the picture as well. So after the financial crisis, remember before people said creating money out of thin air is impossible, then suddenly the bankers needed it to happen and it became possible. But the money that was created through this direct quantitative easing process was actually mostly sent into the finance circuits. Banks rebuilt their balance sheets, their shareholders continued to make money, but it didn't achieve anything of social value. But what we're saying is let's use that power to create money, but make sure that what it pays for is stuff that's useful in terms of the Green New Deal. So, for example, the Bank of England could create enough money to electrify our railways. I mean, that is politically possible. It's just not possible with these particular politicians in power. Right, I'm packing up. Go to the last one. They've got a summary. Here we are. I'm nearly there. So,
What does a Green New Deal look like? I think this is really important because everybody's now grabbing hold of this idea of Green New Deal. Right across the Parliament from right to left, everybody's suddenly saying we need to make this transition. So what is it that would make it specifically a Green New Deal? I think the commitment to social justice is really important. And to be fair, it's a Dutch socialist, Frans Timmermans, who's been put in charge of this in the European context. And I believe he's really committed to that as well. So he will try and make it a just transition where everybody gains. And that also means that jobs will go, but other good quality jobs will come in their place. And people have to be prepared for that, and communities have to be prepared for that, so that there's training, so that there's support, so people don't feel bereft like those people who still live in the coal mining communities of South Wales were just left high and dry. We must not go through a process like that. Then we need to have inclusion, so everybody's involved in thinking through how this process is going to work. It's an exciting process, but it brings significant change, and people can resist that if they don't feel they're part of the process. So that's really why we're having these sessions. I'm going around the Southwest, and my fellow MEPs are going around their regions talking about the Green New Deal, so people realise what's coming and they're prepared to be part of it as well, to talk about how it's going to work and make sure it's really a people's Green New Deal. And lastly, remember that it's not about the size of the economy, it's about the quality of the economy, it's about what it does, it's about shifting towards a sustainable economy of the future, not just about growth and making the economy larger. Thank you very much. I look forward to the other speakers.